decided a while ago to be very selfish and define my success by those around me being successful. That's how I become successful.
Let's say that tomorrow you got the call from Conor McGregor and he said, Mike, I want you. You got 3 months. What do?
I set up a 3-day meeting with Conor. I see if we can get along as men, as humans. Can I fully commit to you? Can I invest my life, my passion, my emotion completely in you? Ronda Rousey is one of those once in a lifetime athletes.
What happens after that fight? That's the part of your job that's not in your job description.
It was more of the emotional side. It was my friend got hurt. I lived in a home because my father, had his massive stroke, was taken out of the house. I had a stay-at-home mom. I'm working in health and fitness and nutrition and lifestyle management and longevity because I'm trying to save my father. Live your brand. You are your brand. You have to live it.
What's your view on this whole crazy issue?
Performance-enhancing drugs work, which is why so many athletes are willing to risk their careers by taking them.
This week, I was extremely excited to welcome Mike Dolce back in the studio. He is the 3-time World MMA Trainer of the Year, 4-time best-selling author and creator of the Dolce Diet. Mike and I had an epic episode about 2 years ago. It's been viewed over 100,000 times, where he said, no pills, no powders, no potions. I love Mike because off camera, he is as intense as he is on camera. He's just military about everything he does. He always said his favorite Friday night is in the gym on the squat rack, and I actually believe it. He's that intense. And we talked a lot about Ronda Rousey, what it was like seeing her getting knocked out with a head kick in Australia, losing her title, how he had to go to the hospital later and really be concerned about her life at first. What his thoughts are with Conor McGregor and the current spat with the UFC and what's going to happen in the future. And just in general, the Dolce Diet is a huge brand. His new book, 3 Weeks to Shredded, is a big hit, and he's actually making money off of selling books, which usually doesn't happen. I love Mike, and we went really deep this time. He's not a guy that really talks about his past, but we spoke about how his father had a stroke when he was a very young boy, how he used to study his homework from the street lamps because they didn't have electricity, and how much of his passion and his career and his life is really almost about helping his father, who had a really bad diet and a really bad health and lifestyle. And it really helps me really put a lot of the puzzle pieces into place about why Mike does what he does. 2/3 of the world is going to be obese soon and in bad shape, and I think Mike is really trying to fix people one at a time. So you're going to love this episode. It's long and packed full of meat, and it really gets into who Mike is and what he's going to be doing in the future, helping UFC fighters, making an incredible company, his brand new daughter, his wife Brandy, everything. So it's fantastic. And a lot of you have been asking me, Brian, what is going on with this thing called London Real Academy? Well, it's 1,000 people from around the world, and we get together, we push each other to be better versions of ourselves, we learn, we come together, we meet face to face, and I put together a little video about it. Check it out.
The entrepreneurial journey, it can be a lonely road. I push myself in so many areas, but you can't do it all yourself.
The thing about the academy is, it's like, look, you have the ideas, you have the ability, you have the skill, and you have the sort of ambition for yourself. But when you have a group of people pulling you forward, it's so important.
Accountability is what's missing from most of the programs or any gurus or any internet mentor that I had before.
I wanted to get some accountability. I wanted to make myself accountable to a group, to you.
The reason we started the academy is because I felt like we were doing these amazing talks, like we'd have a Peter Sage episode or a Dan Pena episode or a Kala or someone, and you get super inspired, and then YouTube stops, and then you go back to your life and you don't make any changes. And it was just like, it felt like, what are we doing? And if you're designing your life right, the good times are now. And in a few years, you'll look back and say, wow, that was amazing.
The thing about the Academy is it has so many different sort of layers to it. I think your web seminars are awesome. The way you broke it down and the style of your teaching is pretty awesome.
I like the feed. When I have to motivate myself, I kind of look at others struggling and getting over those struggles. So I actually follow daily the feed.
Best feature would be the sort of Facebook aspect of it, the social media aspect of it, as in creating a profile with your goals, your dreams.
Everyone's on the same vibe, and we may be at different stages in our journeys, but everyone's on the same page at the end of the day. Everyone's really trying to push themselves and building the best you. It really resonates with me.
And the fact that I'm committing a small amount of money, and the fact that I'm actually trying to interact with those people, means that I'm invested and means that I will keep it for the long run.
You have to be serious about yourself and what you want to achieve. And if you're serious about yourself, this is going to be such a fantastic platform.
London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof. Here we go. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mike Dolce, the American author, trainer, nutritionist, strength and conditioning coach, and motivational speaker. You are the 3-time World MMA Trainer of the Year, 4-time best-selling author, and founder of the Dolce Diet. You work with top fighters like Ronda Rousey, Johnny Hendricks, BJ Penn, Carlos Condit, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, and have never had a fighter miss weight. Mike Dolce, welcome back to London Real.
Brian, thank you. So happy to be here once again.
Dude, it's awesome to have you here. You know, you look as good as the last time you were here, if not better, and it's a different set.
Yeah, I love the set.
It's been 2 years and some change.
Yeah.
Man, how things change, right?
Yeah.
I remember the time we spent here, and I think I remember I walked you back to the hotel, and like you are, you are an intense guy. You're everything about your brand. You're constantly thinking, innovating, yet you're present. And you're talking about a message that like you really believe to your core. And I was just wondering, what's changed in the last couple of years in the world of Mike Dolce, from your business to media to just everything? Catch me up.
I have a baby now.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What's that like? Mine's coming in 5 weeks.
Yeah, congratulations. Boy or
Thank you.
girl? Do you know?
Boy.
Boy. Good for you. Carries on. I have a little girl at home. Victoria is her name. Thank you. 14 months now. So February was her birthday. And it is the most amazing aspect of my life, being a father to her. And having a little girl really brought out a part of me I didn't know existed. And maybe it would have been the same with a boy, just having another life depending on me so much, but truly has changed me for the better, regardless of the greater commitment and responsibility and lack of sleep, and free time in a way. It's just unreal.
How does it change your message? Because like I said, you've always been an intense guy. I want to talk a little bit about, your childhood and, your days back in Jersey, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But, when you have that new life in the world, for a lot of people, it makes them relook at themselves and figure out why they're doing what they're doing, or maybe they should go harder or go different. I don't know how you would go harder from the last time I saw you, but how does it change the way you are as a person?
Definitely makes me want to go harder. I mean, I get my, swing my feet over the bed earlier in the morning with more pop in my step than before, because I have even greater purpose now. I have another mouth to feed. I have another road to pave for her to kind of follow behind. And I have to do that by leading by example. So I'm aware that everything I do, every word I say, every outlook that I project, she's going to see, and it's going to shape who she is. So it really makes me very mindful of who I am and my actions, my words, my inner dialogue, my approach to life, the way I treat people, everything now. I'm more keenly aware of who I am through her eyes. So I think it's made me better everywhere, but it's also exposed my flaws, things that I hadn't known about myself or seen about myself, which is, that's a gift in itself. So it really has allowed me to push myself, push my own boundaries to try and be better. None of us will ever be perfect, for sure, but I have even more reason to strive for that in every aspect of life. So it's not just as a dad, not just as a person, not just as a businessman or a husband, any aspect, every aspect of life. To be really a better citizen of the planet, I think maybe that's a good kind of general term.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about the Dolce Diet, the business you built. Brandy, your wife, is interlinked in that business.
Absolutely.
Podcast co-host. You guys are an amazing team together. Incredible.
Thank you.
But most people see you as the guy that walks on stage with that UFC athlete. They are cutting weight and trying to be in the best shape possible, and yet light as possible on that day when they jump on the scale. You have done that standing next to Quentin Rampage Jackson, Chael Sonnen, Ronda Rousey, Carlos Condit recently, all the greats. For people that don't understand, what's that experience like when you go on stage with them? I mean, you've obviously spent weeks with them at that point. Why are you the best at what you do when it comes to that? What makes you different?
I'd say that there's a few things that differentiate the Dolce Diet from every other brand. I can't say it's the most important, because there's equal importance here, but one of the most important aspects is the evidence-based science that we use to replicate these results. A lot of people don't realize, because they see me as the face of the brand, and sometimes I speak in a very general manner. I use kind of layperson speak in a way, not because I'm better or worse than anybody, because it's a way that taught me to communicate effectively with anybody. So anybody hearing my message will understand my message. And I think what that had done, that had diminished the perception of some people of what we actually do. There's not a lot of science behind the Dolce Diet. Well, that cannot be said, because everything we do is science-based. And every time we work with an athlete, we institute the scientific method. And every athlete that we work with allows us to take that, from hypothesis through conclusion, all the way to our next athlete. So every weekend, every Friday weigh-in, Saturday night of competition, that becomes our own scientific study, scientific method in practice, and then we move on to the next one. So I have journals and notebooks of every athlete I've ever worked with, going back to the early 2000s.
2004, Team Quest.
Head strength coach of Team Quest.
Right, which was up in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
You, I think, drove out there from Jersey.
Did.
Back then it was Randy Couture, was Chael Sonnen maybe in the house?
Chael was just a baby at that time.
Right, and I'm amazed that they could invest, I don't know what the investment was, in a nutrition coach at that point. I mean, that was kind of forward thinking.
Yeah, well, at that point, I wasn't hired as a nutrition coach. I was hired as a strength coach. Okay. I didn't even see myself as a nutrition expert. I was a strength coach. I was a performance coach, you could say. To me, the nutrition was just kind of an add-on, and I was unaware that nobody looked at nutrition the way that we did. Nobody was using that earth grow nutrient approach to nutrition back in those days. It was much more bodybuilding nutrition, practiced by most athletes. They were all focused on the pills, the powders, the potions, which is where that tagline came from, and just dumping a bunch of protein into their mouth after a training session, and then just eating less bad food as they got closer to the competition. Even the guys at Team Quest at that time was the #1 team in the world. Randy had the UFC world title. Dan Henderson had the Pride world title. Matt Lindland was one of the top fighters pound for pound on the planet. Silver medal from, I forget what year, the Greco-Roman wrestling Olympics. You know, this was pre The Ultimate Fighter. Chris Lieben and Nate Quarry hadn't even been on the show yet when I was hired to be a part. And being there, and this kind of goes back to the first question about what differentiates us, is the science. Everything with the Dolce Diet is based upon longevity science. I had found in my own practice, going as an amateur wrestler to a competitive power lifter, I had always focused on sports performance, because that's all the information was out there: how to perform better, how to get stronger, how to get leaner, sports performance. And that was very much supplement derived. Well, that's because those that controlled the major points of education back in those days, and this is pre-internet, of course, this is where everything really came from magazines and from TV shows. Well, that's all just marketing dollars. Who's buying the ads? Well, we're going to do the protein article that really, you know, supports the, you know, $10, $15, $20,000 page, you know, ad material that this company XYZ put into the magazine. So I had followed that like most others had, and then I had a tipping point in my own life that I went to the doctor, and I realized I'm big, I'm strong. I just, you know, had broken, you know, my own personal records in the gym, squat, bench, deadlift. I was 282 pounds. Thought I was just, you know, the man. I mean, strong, you know, as you know, anybody really at that point. I had sleep apnea, I had high blood pressure, I had high cholesterol. You know, I was just, you know, physically I was a mess. And my doctor said to me after pulling my blood work, she said, "Mike, like you have the blood work of a 55-year-old man." I was 25 or 26 at that point. My head spun. How could that be? I'm buying all the right supplements. I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. I so blindly followed the other experts in the field, and I just took it for granted. Now, the exercise, the training demand, all that was on point, and that's why I was able to excel and do well and work. So I opened my business in 1997. I was already coaching elite athletes for quite a long time before that, with great levels of success. So again, nutrition was so off. So that's when I switched and became so focused on longevity-based nutrition, because I was scared for my health. You know, my father had suffered a massive stroke when I was 8 years old, and I had watched that happen. I had watched him die. Massive stroke, heart attack, game over, and he looked great. I mean, big chest, veins in his bicep, he had abs, but his diet was so poor. And my mind was just, again, twisted, spun. Focused on longevity science, took a good 2 years of really investigating and vetting out all of, you know, the information that I could in those days, and started incorporating it into the lives of my athletes. I was a paid strength coach to work with. And then it was just, I was fixing their diets as, you know, a byproduct, just as an add-on. Never even charged anybody for that. When I got to Team Quest, I saw how bad everybody was eating, and I started changing all their eating programs. Here's the workouts. I need you to eat this stuff. They started eating that stuff, which there was no Dolce Diet at that point. That's where the term Dolce Diet was coined at Team Quest, because everybody started to change, and they started to talk about that Dolce Diet. Yeah, I'm doing that Dolce Diet, and that's kind of how it really took off. Of course, you know, we trademarked that because I saw the mass appeal.
It's funny to me, a lot of people watch this, have their own businesses, and they're very entrepreneurial, and then when they look at your branding and your diet, they're thinking that this was a grand plan of yours 15 years ago. Yeah. But it's funny how, you know, you do something that you loved and you believed in, and then someone called it something and it stuck, and then you took the ball and ran with it. Right?
And I didn't want to be in the nutrition world.
Right. You were a fighter still, right?
I was fighting. I was fighting as a way to pay bills. And I was fighting because I enjoyed the competition, but I didn't want to be a professional fighter. I didn't want to be a world champion. I wanted to be an elite coach. That's when I went to Team Quest, my goals were to be a world-class trainer at a world-class facility of world-class athletes. It was never to be a world-class fighter or competitor, but I made $14,000 my first year as, you know, the head strength coach of Team Quest, the world's greatest athletes on the planet. You know, I wasn't getting paid to do that, essentially, and that's a whole nother story. I was working for them for free, 40 of the world's greatest athletes. I was training every day for free, but from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., I got paid to clean the toilets and mop the mat. I would open the gym. I got minimum wage, $8 an hour before taxes, $32 a day before taxes, and I would work until 9 o'clock at night, and I would work with the world's greatest athletes. I would run them through workouts, and I would train a little bit on my own because I had been training previously. I had, as I said, a wrestling background, a jiu-jitsu background. I started with Renzo in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Really? Wow.
And people don't realize my lineage goes so far back. They just see me on TV a couple times like, oh, who's that idiot? I could do that too. I've been a paid elite coach since 1997. My business has been open and profitable since 1997. People don't get that. They just want to put on, make their own t-shirt now, try and get associated with an athlete they cook a few meals for and say, oh, I can do what Dolce does. Nobody can do what I've done. Nobody can do what I do. Nobody has done what I've done because I'm the only one that's done this. Now, I don't say that with ego. I say it out of fact. I am the first one to have ever done this. And I will say that I'm the best. My company is the best because the level of education of those on my team, it's a team of registered dietitians and exercise physiologists and certified strength and conditioning specialists that sit in my office that vet the programs that we create based upon the experience of myself going back to 1990 as the captain of my high school wrestling team, freshman year varsity captain. So for 4 years, I was running the strength and conditioning programs and weight cuts of athletes at 13 years old. It's what I've always been doing. People don't see that, they don't get that.
Right. So many people go with the overnight success, and there's always 10, 15 years behind that overnight
Absolutely.
success.
There's no overnight
So you were
success.
training with Renzo back when he was on 8th Avenue and 37th Street above the methadone clinic.
Absolutely.
Back then, okay. I trained there. I trained there in 2002, I think.
Yeah.
Before we got the fancy gyms. I didn't know you were doing jiu-jitsu back then.
Yep.
You knew John Danaher probably back then.
John Danaher was one of the first, when I first went to Renzo's, I would do one private a month with John Danaher just to help expedite my process, because you could go out there, you could get your ass kicked and kick ass, but John would kind of clean up some technique, and I had a little bit of money because I was a municipal tax assessor at that point. I was making a 6-figure income, which we spoke about on the last show. I had some money in my pocket, but I would work until 6 p.m. I would take a 2-hour train ride, and I would do the night class at Renzo's 3 times a week, and then I'd pay John once a month to kind of give me a little bit of extra time because I couldn't get enough mat time. And then I'd take the 2-hour train ride all the way home. So I'd get home, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'd wake up at 6 to go back to the office to be a tax assessor.
Right. And so people that don't know, we're talking about Renzo Gracie, which is one of the Gracie lineage of the creators of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, also known as Gracie Jiu Jitsu. Yeah. But back in the late 90s, it was not fashionable by any means. No. And he had a couple, I think his first 2 black belts were Matt Serra and John Danaher, something like that. Yeah. And he had this old place that was on like 37th and between 8th and 9th Avenue in New York City. It was like literally above a methadone clinic.
Literally, yeah.
And one of my old buddies in New York, he got his purple belt from John, and he took me there to train in 2002. After I moved to London, I went back, and he's like, we're gonna do a private session with John. And John is known around the world as really almost like kind of legendary status.
Absolutely.
As being one of the guys, because he's a real thinking man guy. I think he's got a philosophy degree, PhD in philosophy. Yeah. And he's really known as a proper thinker. And now Renzo's in a newer gym, and now it's quite the place to train in Manhattan. Sure. He's got amazing athletes, but you were there back in the day.
I was back in the super early days, yeah.
All right, so let me continue with your story. You went out, Team Quest, you're training these guys, but you're really cleaning toilets, making the money. I think it's great for people to hear that you're doing that anyways, and you dropped a 6-figure income in Jersey to go pursue your dreams.
I did.
I still find that a story that really is never told about you.
It's funny how selective the stories that come out about me are. It's all, if it's not drama, then nobody wants to talk about it. So I was working as a municipal tax assessor in the state of New Jersey. I was the youngest sitting assessor in the state at that time. I was in charge of a city called Long Branch, which is on the Atlantic Ocean. It's one of the most affluent cities in the state. Bruce Springsteen and John Bon Jovi, I mean, we're talking about massive taxpayers were there, and I was in charge of the valuation of real property. So I was in charge of $2.2 to $2.6 billion in real estate assets as a kid in my early 20s. Very strong math and science background. It was rather easy for me. I passed my CTA, Certified Tax Assessor, test on the first try without studying and had a 17% pass rate. So there was guys in the industry that were in the industry for a decade or so. They would take it 2 and 3 times before finally cracking the code, and I was able to do well. Again, it's kind of not bragging, might sound like it is, but sciences and mathematics came very, very easily to me. I was, honors in school and, in the math and the sciences again, without studying or even trying to do that. It just suited me. So that information, that mathematical, logical, scientific brain is why I believe we have the success that we have with the Dolce Diet and with our athletes, and the fact that no athlete has ever missed weight while following our programs, not one, even the worst ones, even the Johnny Hendrickses of the world, who admit to not following our program until I come in and force him to do so. I was always able to get my athletes on weight through scientific means. You don't just luck into that. You don't magic hocus pocus into that. It's all science-based.
Let me address that. What is bro science?
You know, bro science is more, and what's interesting, bro science is a term, it's a slang term, essentially, that people use. And I didn't even know the term until recently, you know, the last couple of years, and people have kind of like tried to associate that with myself or my brand. Now, there's actually legitimacy to bro science because it's comes more from the bodybuilding world. Now, you look at the Mr. Olympia stage, most of those guys up there are bro scientists.
Right, they figured it out themselves.
They figured it out themselves. They figured out what works, and they kind of pulled all the information from whatever sources, some legitimate, some not, and they figured it out, and they went up there and they achieved very low single-digit percentages of body fat while having, you know, massive amounts of muscle. Now, do they use performance-enhancing drugs? Most of them certainly do, but there's a science in itself to that. I mean, that comes from the medical field, pharmaceutical world. There's a science to that. There's a chemistry, there's biology. There's all these things that go into that, not, you know, supporting or, you know, bashing the bodybuilding side, but they're pretty damn intelligent with what they're able to do, because they do something that's so niche and it's so far removed from what any other human being can actually do with legitimate science, PhD credentials or not. These guys can do it. I know PhDs. There's PhDs that tried to break into our industry. You know, there's, you know, Masters of Science and registered dietitians and all these great certificates where individuals would sit in school for 4, 6, you know, 8 years to get their degrees, and they would try and break into the field, bashing me the whole way, and they would fall flat on their face because they couldn't produce results. Now, one of the biggest, you know, pieces of our business is we're able to replicate results. We can replicate results regardless of the individual, regardless of the age, regardless of the gender.
Weight classes, genders, that kind of
thing. Geography, middle of Brazil, Portland, you know, Pacific Northwest, doesn't matter. Our results are always the same. They're always perfect.
Right. I was thinking of bro science. Dorian Yates,
Yeah.
6-time Mr. Olympia, was sitting in this chair about 6 months ago. And he was talking about how a guy in Birmingham, right, which is pretty much the center of England,
Yeah.
with all of his resources were probably some bodybuilding magazines. The rest of it, he had no access to the Venice Beach crowd, to anything going out in Los Angeles, whatever that science was out there. And for 6 years, he managed to push himself to get the right sleep, to get the right nutrition, to get the right training, to be on the top of the game, the, you know, the best built man in the world, according to that micro niche, for 6 years in a row.
Yeah.
So that's probably a great example of, you know, some, whatever you want to call it, application science. I don't know what that is.
He would be, and I'm not saying this, but by the term of bro science, he would be the king, because he wasn't working with a team of scientists. I don't believe he has a degree in sciences. I don't even know if he has a degree at all, but he's one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. What he was able to do, what he was able to accomplish. I remember, was it 96 or so, when he completely changed his already elite level physique, because I was a kid at that time, you know, relatively speaking. I was younger compared to I am now, you know, going back 20 plus years. And I remember that change that Dorian had made. You know, I was kind of a fan of bodybuilding while Lee Haney was still reigning. Then Dorian came in and took a second to Lee. Then Dorian took the throne from him and kind of moved on. And he was able to kind of completely overhaul his own physique in a sport that the level of perfection or the level of improvement is so small. These guys can put on 4 pounds in a year of lean muscle. That's massive at that level. You know, that's like a sprinter in the 100 being able to take a full second off their time. It's almost unheard of. Dorian was able to do that based upon, you know, I don't want to use the term bro science, but, you know, less than what some would consider the true science.
Right. He says he still has books with every single workout written when he was that. You know, you guys would get along really well. You know, he has everything written down. He talks about his discipline, his sleep habits, how he could never go see a movie, how he would never go out to dinner, how he had to have his sleep, about trudging through the snow in the middle of winter, thinking about the guys on Venice Beach out in their swim trunks and him trudging through the snow for 2.5 hours just to open up the gym to get that leg workout in that he knew he needed for the competition 6 months down the road. I mean, and you hear him talk about it, and he gets hairs on the back of my neck to stand up, because I think he's got similar discipline and a scientific mind like you do.
And that's, when people talk about bro science, well, that's a way, I feel, for the unaccomplished to try and tear down those that have made accomplishments. Now, what we do, not only do I have a team of what would classically be considered professional scientists with their degrees, a lot of what they've learned in school, I have to deprogram from them. I remember our head dietitian, when she first started working with us, I was teaching her how to build a peaking program for a weight class oriented athlete. And as I'm going through, she said, well, that's not going to work, because our athlete wasn't going in the caloric deficit. She's like, well, you can't lose weight unless you take in less calories than you consume. And I laughed. I said, where did you learn that? She's like, well, in school. I said, have you ever tried it? She's like, well, no. Well, this is what I've been doing for the last 15 years, and each time is actually better, and each time I can feed my athletes more. Now, what we're doing right now in my office with my athletes, they're not even aware of in university yet. I like to say we're actually riding the cresting wave, and the school system, they're still kind of, paddling around waiting for a wave to come and take them to the beach to find us, to find the work that we've done. Remember, I work with the world's greatest athletes every weekend. Those performances are the first time they've ever performed like that. I did a few seminars for the military with Rich Franklin, and people asked, well, how do you guys cut weight? Rich talked about the way he cut weight: calorie deficit, increased work, expenditure, really tracks his macros. And I'm like, oh, Mike, and what do you do with your calories and macros? So what are you talking about? We don't track calories. We don't track macros. We use a completely different method. Rich did a lot of kind of the supplements, and I would take a scoop of this and a scoop of that. We're like, we don't do any of that stuff. We focus on completely fulfilling the energy needs of our clients, of our athletes, without spilling over, but we really fuel them for the work product that they will need in order to perform. And as a byproduct of that, they're able to change their lean mass composition. At the very end, the dehydration or the wringing out the water, that becomes just simply balancing the electrolytes. Where this past week, I was with Manny Gambarian, who fought on the UFC Tampa card. And our method of cutting weight was just hanging out in the hot tub, in the sunshine.
You always make it look easy.
It's easy. And, it was cool because Dan, unfortunately, got pulled off the card, but Dan Henderson comes out, and I was Dan's employee in the early days. So now Dan's here, different phases of life. He's here hanging out, drinking a beer in the hot tub, kind of, hanging out, cutting weight with us, having a good time. All the other athletes are freaking killing themselves in the workout room with plastics and hoodies and just working out and kind of collapsing in the workout rooms. There's no sauna on premises. Other athletes are complaining because their diet coaches, their nutrition guru is locking them in bathrooms with hair dryers on at full blast to keep the heat on in their bathrooms while putting them in tubs of scalding water so hot that they can't even get in. It takes them 2, 3, 5 minutes to just get into the water. They don't understand how easy it actually is to cut weight professionally in a healthy manner, and that they're actually doing harm to their client by using these archaic methods. That's the bro science. What we do, we're so far evolved from that. We're so far evolved, people don't understand, therefore they say that can't work. And the simplicity of what we do is so simple, people say, well, there's no way, there's got to be something else you guys are doing. But if you hear my athletes talk for the last decade, or you follow us along, it'd be cool to have you guys come and follow us along one day. Actually, kind of cool to really document it, to see. All's I do is, I like to say, I kind of build this bubble of positivity around the athlete.
Yeah, it's funny because you talk about how academia, they've learned all of this knowledge, and then they're saying, okay, that teaches us this, and yet you are literally in a laboratory every week that everyone has to watch. And for people that don't even know what this whole weight cutting thing is all about, these fighters fight at prescribed weights: 145 pounds, 155 pounds, 170, 205, etc. And they have to make that weight 24 hours typically before they fight. And then they have to fight the next day. And I want to ask you about what the caliber of an athlete is for a UFC fighter. But for people that don't know, it's probably one of the most difficult 15-minute, of your life, fighting 3 or 5 rounds in the UFC. Yeah. It's incredible. And so not only do you have to have them cut weight, but then they have to perform at the highest level 24 hours later. And you do this year in, year out, year in, year out. So you are actually collecting the data on the ground floor and adjusting as necessary.
Absolutely.
And so you are kind of really at the front.
I'm completely at the forefront with the best view. You know, as I said earlier, I have journals on every athlete, their entire training camp, every ingredient that they've consumed, every ounce of water that they've drank, every trip to the bathroom, every bowel movement. I mean, sometimes the color and texture consistency of their bowel movements. Too much information, some people might say watching this right now, but not for us, because that tells us a lot about the athlete. I know what their stress levels are, I know what their sense of humor is, I speak with their spouses, their teammates, significant other, and I understand more about how they're sleeping at night. Not talking to the athlete, what's their sense of humor like? Are they joking around? What's your interpersonal relationship like? I get that information because those are data points for us to track also, and that allows us to really look into the future and determine, do we have to change their caloric load? Do we have to change the timing and consistency of their meals? Do we have to play with the periodization table of their training camp? Do we need to give them time off? Do we need to put more time in? I mean, wake up heart rates, post-training heart rates, what they weigh before training session, what they weigh after, how much water they're actually losing, what they're, respirating through night. We have
There's
all
a lot
that.
of science here.
There's so much science here, and the knuckleheads in the world, they don't even understand that these are parts of it. They just think it comes down to calories in versus calories out. That's the least of it. That's the least of it, that they don't get that. And that, I laugh in a way because I know, well, shit, job security, they don't even understand what they're doing. They can't build this spaceship because they don't even understand how it can fly. But at the same time, I feel bad for the athletes and the clients that they work with because they're degrading the athlete's health. They're taking years off the career. Johnny Hendricks is a great example. We worked with him, helped him win a world title, helped make him millions of dollars. And then he reached the point in his career that he decided, well, I should say we decided. He decided that he didn't have the discipline to follow a program such as ours, which is truly a lifestyle change. He wanted more of an inexpensive, quick fix. So he brought somebody in that was not certified, had no credentials, self-proclaimed nutrition expert, had put Johnny on a severe calorie-restricted diet. Johnny was able to make weight rather easily as far as what his total body weight was, but it totally took him out of his game, made him extremely weak, and he went out and lost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars by getting knocked out in the first round. Where with us, Johnny was able to go 10 rounds versus Robbie Lawler, one of the hardest hitters in the world. And he got knocked out in 3 minutes by Stephen Thompson, who's not really a hard hitter. No, Stephen's a great fighter. And that shows the difference. And what we did, Johnny was tweeting his actual meal plan, and we did a complete micro and macronutrient breakdown, calorie breakdown. Johnny was eating 1,100 calories a day as a 190-pound man 3 weeks before competition. Our athletes are eating closer to 3,000 calories a day that far from competition while having similar body weights, improved lean mass composition, and completely fulfilling their micronutrient content, which, I mean, he was completely devoid of micronutrients. I wasn't in the camp, so I'm going off the data that he was putting into the world. So I see that, and this goes to my point. Job security, but at the same time, I feel horrible because Johnny's a sweet guy, he's a good person, and he lost millions of dollars from his family and his little babies at home because he was listening to one of the knuckleheads out there that were just selling him wolf tickets to try and get business, to promote their own brand, not caring about Johnny's brand, Johnny's life, Johnny's career, Johnny's longevity. So that's kind of why I'm speaking here, and we put the content out that we do. We don't want it to be a secret. We want everybody to have this access.
And maybe deep down, Johnny wanted to cheat a bit on his diet. Maybe deep down didn't want Dolce to make him do the things he didn't want to do, and wanted it a little bit easier to get there. So cut some corners and paid for it maybe in the end.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of soft science too. I remember I think were maybe training Thiago Alves, and I think you might have been down in Florida or something, and I think it might have come up where he was just like, hey, maybe we can go out to this club one night, and I'm not going to drink, but I'm just going to go to this club. Why don't we go there on Saturday? It'll be a great way to kind of let off steam. Yeah. And I think you said something to him to the effect of, so let me ask you, Thiago, are any current world champions going to be at the club that night? Current. I think this is what you said. I might be paraphrasing.
You have a great memory.
And he was like, well, what do you mean? And like, would any of those guys be in the night, say 2 or 3 weeks before the club? No, probably not. Why not? Because they're going to leave a family that night. They're going to have to come home and deal with the wife the next day. They're going to maybe have slept not very well. Maybe they would have a Diet Coke that night. Maybe they would be tempted to have a beer that night. And so in the Dolce world, we don't play that game, right?
No. We don't allow variables. We try and eliminate as many variables as possible because we are looking to replicate results, known results. We have an equation. We know this equation. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. 2 plus 2a, we don't know, might. 2 plus, 2b, we don't know what's going to happen at that point. We don't want to change that. Now, we can always improve. We can find more efficient ways to replicate results through known variables, and it goes through our scientific method of what we've done with that athlete, what science has said, but we've tested, and then what other athletes have done up until that point. So we are always tweaking and evolving what we do, but going and standing in the club, you're going to be standing on those legs that you trained on, and you did hill sprints and treadmill runs and kick tie pads. They need to recover. So already we're sliding backwards. Just that concept right there. You should be in bed at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday, Saturday night, period, the end, allowing your body to naturally wake when the sun comes up with your circadian rhythm, allowing proper deeper restful sleep, so we have greater growth hormone production. We're having more rest or more recuperation, more replication of tissue. Our bodies actually, we're working with our hormonal cascade by following these concepts that we try and instill on the athlete. We can't really enforce. I can just make suggestions. And with Thiago, he's such a great guy. He's like, yeah, okay, coach. Like, and not like, okay, F you. Is like,
yeah, you're right.
You're right. And that's why he's kept me around. I mean, I'm going in my 6th year right now with Thiago. And Thiago Alves, great story, the UFC trouble trial when it came to the scale. Thiago Alves, who missed weight twice, got in trouble for using a banned diuretic, not with us, prior to us, refused to cut 8 ounces of water, which is less water that would actually fit in this cup. Instead of losing that little bit of water, he instead agreed to give up $12,000 of his purse because he physically couldn't lose that much water that you or I could lose in about 5 minutes of skipping rope. He was so physically drained. That same Thiago Alves, who missed weight versus Matt Hughes, I think he came in at 176 pounds for that fight, is now under my guidance, me being a part of his greater team and his discipline and work ethic, he's now dropping to 155 pounds. That's what we're doing this year. We perfected Thiago Alves to such a degree that he's been on weight at 171 pounds the night before weigh-ins, eating a full dinner, eating breakfast the day of, and not cutting a single ounce of fluid on weigh-in day since over the last 3 fights, 2 years during his comeback, to the point now that he's walking around in the high 170, low 180s, and he's now in a physical condition that he can make 155 pounds. All through the scientific method, all through the Dolce Diet, all through these principles that he really did take these on board, these principles on board.
Let me ask you a question. Case study.
Yes.
We found out yesterday Conor McGregor is not fighting UFC 200.
Yeah.
Who knows what happened? Pulled out. He's going to retire. Dana says we're moving on. Whatever. Let's say that tomorrow you got the call from Conor McGregor and he said, I actually cut a deal with Dana. I'm going to defend my 45-pound belt. I'm up here in Iceland with Gunny right now. I'm at 175. He's probably at 180.
Yeah.
UFC 200, I think, is in July, right? So give us about 3 months. Mike, I want you.
Yeah.
You got 3 months.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I set up a 3-day meeting with Conor first. Now, I've been around him quite a few times. I know John Kavanaugh rather well. I like those guys. They're good guys.
Awesome.
I set up 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, essentially, with the athlete, convenient time, where I live with them, I shadow them. I spare bedroom in their house, sleep on the couch if I have to. I'm a little old to do that, but I still do such things. And we breathe the same air, and I see if we can get along as men, as humans. Forget coach-athlete relationship. Can we get along? Do I like you? Can I fully commit to you? Can I invest my life, my passion, my emotion completely in you? And do you have the moral and ethics that I need to truly get behind and stand shoulder to shoulder through thick and thin? No matter what happens, win or lose, I'm going to be there because I love you. that's how I am. I'm at that level with my athlete. I respect you so much. I will go through it. I will leave my family, my beautiful daughter. I will commit to doing that only to a select few human beings that are worthy as men and women. And that I don't care about their accolades or how much money they have or what part of the card they're on at this point. Can I help this human improve their life, achieve their goals? Do I respect this human enough to give up that time and give up the attention of the other 7 billion humans on the planet whose life I'm trying to change also? So we spend that time together, but also it allows me to understand, will this athlete now respect and listen to me as a coach? Will we have that relationship that I can truly help them? Because there's athletes out there that wanted to hire me just to say, hey, I'm working with Dolce, and offered me, big checks to do so. You won't listen to me. I know for a fact, which is one of the reasons why I left Hendricks after the second Robbie fight. You're not going to listen to me, you know what, I'm out, kind of have fun. A guy like Conor, I believe he is that type of athlete because he's a winner. And he's a good guy. I met him initially when he fought in Boston, I think Max Holloway. He was the nicest, most respectful. He called me coach and sir. In those days, not that much younger than me. I mean, coach and sir. And when I see him today, multi-millionaire, completely different, calls me coach and sir still. That type of respect. So an athlete like Conor is a rare type of person.
To watch the rest of this fascinating interview, click on the link below and go to londonrealacademy.com. There you can sign in with your social media login and watch the rest of the episode for free, along with all of our episodes on London Real, my webinars, and all of our premium content, all located over at londonrealacademy.com. So click on the link below, you'll be directed there, and you can watch the rest of this fascinating interview, and I'll see you there.
The noises, the music that they listen to, it allows me to get in their head a little bit, understand.